الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. We're going to be covering inshallah two sets of adab. We'll be looking first inshallah at the adab of correspondence. In terms of correspondence, many things have moved on from what it used to be for hundreds of years, since the time of writing. There are discussions that writing was not something that people always did. People corresponded in different ways. And it was only after a certain prophet who's, they say, is the first person to write. So writing is also something that took place. Today we also write, but the medium of writing, the speed by which correspondence reaches somebody else is quite amazing. And day by day it's getting faster and faster. Since the last few weeks, since WhatsApp has started allowing calls, I've received calls from people that I'd never received calls from. Allah. The thing is that alhamdulillah, I keep my Wi-Fi and connection off. People complain a lot. My phone keeps beeping. Well, it's not going to beep unless you want it to beep. It's all in your hands. You can literally control everything on a phone today. My phone keeps beeping and they keep complaining. Well, stop it beeping then. Just put your Wi-Fi off. Put your data off. I don't have any battery left. Halfway through the day they're looking for a plug. They're in your car, they want a plug. Hey, what's your problem? You got a new phone. Half the day's gone and your battery's gone. Phones are getting only better in terms of battery life. They're supposed to be getting better. But we're taxing them out of beyond their status. So, believe me, WhatsApp, most of it is a big waste of time. There's the useful, but a lot of it is a lot of waste of time. You don't need to be in all of those groups. And it's just one of those things where I'm on groups, I'm not on any social group. All my groups are all to do with ulama. But even then, there is the useful and there is not as much useful. It's all useful, but you have to have a lot of time for it. So literally, if I look at my WhatsApp right now, I will be 1,000 messages behind on many of these groups. So before, what I would think is, one day when I have time, I will go through all of them, because there are some useful things among 10 things I said. There may be one thing useful. But finally I gave up. So there was once I had 13,000 messages on a group, and then I said, okay, now I give up. Officially I give up. So I clicked it and I read the last few messages, and then it built up again. And it builds up every two days at 1,000 messages, and I just can't keep up anymore. So it's just really, these things are a big waste of time in many cases. You'll spend hours doing that. What Hakim al-Ummat Mawlana Ashraf Ali Thanwi says in this chapter on the adab of correspondence, he says, do not read the letters of others. Now remember, he's talking about a time when there's no Twitter, there's no WhatsApp, there's no email. It's literally hard case writing. Somebody came to me the other day and he's had a problem with a family member and he wants to apologize, and he apologized in a WhatsApp message. Allah. And the response was also like a WhatsApp message. They didn't accept the apology. I said, is your apology only worth a WhatsApp message? It was a big problem, not a simple problem. Police were called, and now you want to apologize by WhatsApp. You must be joking. I said, write a letter, do some tahajjud, give some sadaqah. Like, if you really want to make them feel, they have to feel you mean it. If they're not going to entertain you physically, then the minimum is that you go out of your way to write an email if you don't. A nice long email or a handwritten letter of apology. Mawlana Ashraf Ali Thanwi is obviously writing at the time of letters. However, a lot of this we can apply. People say the ulama should tell us the adab of WhatsApp, and at that time it was MSN Messenger. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, except that it's just a bit more frequent. So one has to be more controlled. Writing a letter, get a paper, get the right words, make sure you've spelled it correctly, have the tipex there. It was an effort. So people said less. But now it's so easy to say things. Do not read the letters of others. If a letter is not intended for you, do not read it. So there's privacy issues here. And people, sensible people know that. But from a Sharia perspective as well, it's an amana. You are not allowed to read somebody else's letter. Just like it's not right to eavesdrop on someone, it's the same thing to read their correspondence. So if somebody's gave you their phone to use or whatever, and then they went out somewhere for whatever reason, you can't start looking at their browsing history, for example, or their WhatsApp messages. And you know, some phones they pop up the message, the next message or whatever, and you should avoid. It should be avoided. It's all about personal discipline in this case. Whether somebody finds out or not is not the point. It's all about a personal discipline. It's all about personal accountability. And the more we are more personally accountable to ourselves for these things when nobody else is looking, that is how much closer we'll be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we only do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah is watching. Do not read any correspondence which is in front of a person. Perhaps the correspondence was meant to have been kept hidden from you. For example, somebody's message pops up, on their screen. Even if the paper is in front of a person, even if the paper in front of a person happens to be printed matter, so it's a magazine or it's something else for that matter. Of course, if it's kept there as one of those waiting room magazines, like those things, sometimes people keep those in the house. If they don't know how to speak too much, then they keep magazines there, so when their guests come, they'll actually be able to look at the magazines or these big books, the table books that you have and things like that. If it's that, of course, if it's intended for anybody to look at, then there's nothing wrong with that. Like if they've got something under a stack of paper and then your eye can I look at this, and you pull it out. It wasn't there for the public necessarily. It was underneath something. Yes, if it's just there in front, different issue. What Hakimul Ummah says, he says, it is quite possible that the person concerned does not wish it to be known that he has in his possession that type of literature. That he reads Harry Potter books, for example. Or Dinar Kuntz or whatever else people are reading these days. It may just be that they don't want you to know. Because then you may associate things with him. It may not be theirs, in fact. It may be somebody else's book there. Some people, when sitting by an acquaintance or friend, have the habit of picking up letters, printed paper, etc., which may be in front of the desk. It's not permissible to do so. I remember we were sitting in Africa, and the food was brought in. So one of us took a picture of it because it was unusual, desert life kind of food. So then the host, he said, let me see the picture. So he took the phone and then he literally started flicking through. Somebody shows you one picture, you can't take the liberty to go backwards or forwards. It's amana. Then on the topic of writing, write very clearly. The topic should not be expressed ambiguously. Write very clearly, whether you're writing by hand or email or text, but in fact, especially text messages. There is room for so much confusion in text messaging, thus WhatsApp, etc. Because people are very liberal in the way they don't express themselves properly. It's not supposed to be a self-containing letter. It's a short message. Some people are used to just firing off 10 different WhatsApp messages that are then connected together. Some people like to write self-containing ones. One has to be careful that what you're writing is going to be understood. Especially with WhatsApp, what happens, and I'm mentioning WhatsApp a lot because it is an extremely popular and a very common facility that's used. So that's probably why the discussion here, but it would apply to anything of similar nature. Sometimes what happens with these things is that you've sent off 2 messages, 2 statements. Third and fourth statement you couldn't because your WhatsApp went off, your connection went off. Now on the other hand, the person has just suddenly reached half the message and it may cause a catastrophe, And likewise, there's room for a lot of misunderstanding in short messages anyway. There's been breakups of marriages and all sorts of things just because of, especially when there's a underlying issue going on, then people will generally take things more negatively. So one has to be just extremely careful. So do not write ambiguously. Be very clear. Be very clear. And if you know, and people should know, some people have the ability to be comprehensive in their writing. Some people should realize that they're not very comprehensive in their writing, that they do write ambiguously. It's a person's recognition. Some people write ambiguously. They should know that. They've probably been told. Once you've been told one time, 2 times, 3 times, oh, I misunderstood your text. Sorry, I thought it was something else. Then understand that you've got a problem here. Because if you don't know, that's worse. Because one is that I don't know, and I don't know that I don't know. How long are we going to carry on like that for? Because that, if we've made that mistake 2, 3 times, that people have misunderstood us, there must be a problem with us and not, unless it's the same person misunderstanding, then maybe it's the other person. But one should always be self-critical as much as possible first. And so many times what happens is that because the WhatsApp thing is just so fast, when you write a message, you don't look at it. And a lot of us are using predictable text, and it makes some serious mistakes sometimes. It will change, it will do some crazy things sometimes. And if you're in a hurry, driving, and you're writing text messages, that's extremely dangerous. But even in general, we don't always look, and we're just in the heat of the moment. You need to respond quickly, and you just do it on that little, just crazy. I get questions on WhatsApp from around the world, literally from other countries, and I don't know, once you're on a few groups, then everybody gets your number, and then I just don't entertain them. I don't have the time for questions. People will write you anonymous questions from around the world, from Canada, from Norway, from wherever. Anonymous, like, who are you? Introduce yourself. What is this? Like an exam question. Fatwa they're asking for. And there's no name, nothing. It's bad adab. It's just completely bad adab. Sometimes I'll say, who are you? I want to stay anonymous. Okay, then please email me. This is my personal phone. You could be getting me in trouble here. We have to be careful these days. You could be getting me in trouble. Please answer my question. I said, look, I'm giving you the facility. Email me. Anonymous email. Make up a name. I don't care. Right? But when it's on my personal phone, right, which is not for fatwa service, then I need to know who you are. So sometimes they don't even want to reveal themselves, and they want to contact you. One has to be careful. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's bad adab anyway. In each letter, that's why he says here, write your address fully. Now, when you don't do that by email generally, but you have to write your name. He's assuming that the name will already be written. That's why he's saying write the address fully. It is not the duty of the addressee to remember one's address, which may have not been furnished in an earlier letter. He's saying that because generally they need to write a response. So you may have had some correspondence before with an alim, with a mufti, or anybody else for that matter, and you've provided your address first time round. Now you've written another letter after several months, and you don't write your address. They're going to have to go through all of their letters, and if they're like some people, they just get rid of everything. And there's no way to know, because especially in those days it was much more complicated. Nowadays you could just fire off another email, but most people will not. They will send you an email. If they don't get a response, they'll just think that you don't want to respond, and they will just think things. Sometimes people will say, I did send you an email, can you please respond, or something. So there's just confusion like that. So give them the details. Now in this case, with email and with phone numbers and everything, all of that is automatic anyway. So it does minimize that kind of confusion nowadays. If in a letter reference is made to a matter which was mentioned in an earlier letter, then include a copy of that earlier letter. This will save the addressee the inconvenience of searching for the earlier letter. Now, the example of this is you receive a question. It's not clear. Sometimes what happens in the fatwa situation is that people will write you a question. Unfortunately, they don't know how to ask the question, and that's fine, understandable. So it has many possibilities. Now the only way to answer that is to write a commentary. If this is the case, if you mean this, then this is the answer. If you mean this, then this is the answer. And if you mean this, then this is the answer. We don't have time for that. That's writing a book, a sharh, a commentary, a gloss. right? Hashia. We don't have the time. So we'll quickly stand back and say, okay, can you tell us exactly what you mean by this, that, and the other? Now the response you'll get will be a fresh email with no trail of the past correspondence. Very difficult. We're not answering questions each day, right? It's difficult. You might look at it after a week, and now you've forgotten. I mean, personally speaking, I probably receive about 100 emails a week minimum on questions. Minimum. So you can't remember the full details of everything. So keep the correspondence. I mean, I'm probably turning this too much into a question and answer fatwa issue, but this is just general correspondence with people as well. Unless you've got reason to hide what's been discussed before. Yes, for example, if you've given a bank account details or something like that, then then in that case what you should do is you should remove it from any further. Because it's just going back and forth, and that's an insecure. So you've sent your bank details over for somebody to maybe pay you or whatever, and then after that there's been a continuum of did you receive the money? Then remove that. That is the most secure thing to do anyway. Do not write so many questions in a single letter which pose an inconvenience to the addressee. After receiving a reply, write the further questions. Okay, this is very specific because a lot of people used to correspond with the author, with Hakim al-Ummat. So sometimes you do receive literally a questionnaire, 20 questions, and it feels like an examination question. You're back in the examination chamber. That's how it feels. There's no pleasant greetings or anything like that. It's just 20 questions. No jazakallah maybe even in that case. That's an examination question. They don't thank you for answering the questions, do they? If the addressee is one, now I used to get really frustrated with that, but we're told to be, we're told not to get frustrated with that, because at the end of the day we have to deal with people. If somebody is ignorant, you don't make yourself ignorant. You just have to answer people's questions. If the addressee is one who has many occupations, do not encumber him with the request to convey your salams to others. So you write your question or whatever, and then I say, please give my salams to so and so as well. He probably won't remember, right? And it's just additional. This is coming from somebody who's very particular about his time, and every moment of his time is accepted. So one has to think that way as well. Do not impose such a task on any of your seniors. It's not respectful to give them a task to do, unless of course a general salam to your family, something like that. If it is disrespectful to write to a person a request pertaining to something involvement in which is not appropriate for the addressee. When a reply is wanted, enclose I think the self-reply, the reply page self-addressed envelope is probably obsolete nowadays. You know what, it's quite strange. I have, in the last few years, I have actually received 2 questions by letter, literally, with a stamped addressed envelope. And the worst thing is I haven't been able to respond to those 2. I confess, it's just, you just about do the emails, but now to handwrite something and go and post it, Allahu Akbar. Do not write illegibly, nor in such faint pencil which makes reading difficult. Do not cram the words nor the lines one on top of the other. Now, on the internet, obviously on email, sometimes people write with some really funky fonts. And the worst part, which I haven't seen much of recently, or maybe people just don't write to me like that anymore. They don't, the texties writing, the shorthand to say you, they write a you, and all that. Because I would never entertain those. Anytime I would receive any question with those kind of shorthand, I would literally send it back and say, please write it again. I don't understand what you're saying. Because that was extremely disrespectful. It is not permissible to utilize the stationery of one's employers for one's private letters. And this of course goes with lots of things. Unless of course they're fine. They're doing booming business and they don't mind, then it's all fine. I remember somebody who's got a bakery business, and he was asking somebody to make him signs to put up in his business. Please, the employees must not eat the pistachios and the almonds and the cashews. They're very expensive, And they were just, mashallah, India Muklai. It's not that bad, but So this happens. Many people, they use their employers' stationery, printing. A lot of these things happen, unfortunately. Right? Some people justify it because they may work for the civil service. It's communal property, they say, or whatever. These things, one has to be careful about what they're doing. Of course, something, one has to be answerable to the people that it's owned by. If you've got permission, then it's okay. If you've got permission, generally with companies, if they're booming business like Google, they have different types of canteens and cuisines and all sorts of things. Your business goes down slightly, they'll start putting the restrictions on. This is the way things work nowadays. Some people, instead of sending a prepaid self-addressed envelope, include stamps to cover postage. This is incorrect. Again, this is just adab, and I'm just reading this, although most of us may never do this, but this is just to give you an understanding of the thought process. He says, don't just send a stamp, because then the person, the mufti or whoever, the scholar, whoever it is, will have to, or anybody will have to find that envelope and address it. It just takes time. When it's a busy period, then don't do that. And you might think, well, when you write a letter to the Home Affairs Department or the DVLA or whatever, you don't have to do all of this. Well, of course not. You get charged for that. Your taxes go there. They have secretaries to do all of these things. Ulama don't have that. Ulama don't charge for fatwas. This is a free service they're doing. So don't expect the same kind of setup and facility for that. Because clearly, I just want to make that very clear. And it's ajib because we're living in a time when the state does not sponsor the scholars to do this. Whereas under the Uthmani Khilafah, this was the case. They had who they called the Shaykh al-Islam. The Shaykh al-Islam of the Uthmani Empire in Istanbul. They had a proper system, and they still have somewhat the same kind of system, where it was state-sponsored, it was state-run, it's a state, part of the awqaf, etc. And they have people working, they have the clerks working, and all of this, it was a paid job, so professionally done. Everything, all the fatwas that came in were then handed over to somebody and done properly and everything. I mean, even today in big madrasas where they have a Darul Ifta, they have staff, but again, it's all based on donations there. So they just can't be as organized as another office with proper flows and systems and everything in place. So we're living in a different dimension. We're living in a different kind of dimension, and then we complain when we don't get the same kind of response as we do in a professional organization. There's a big difference between these two kinds of organization. Just because lack of funds, money talks these days. That's what it is. Another thing is, do not be wasteful with writing paper. I've noticed this, especially when there's a course or something, and people have to send questions. They'll take the whole A4 sheet, write a small question on there, and send it forward. And you have to then remind people that, look, just tear that strip off and keep the rest. Just write the question at the bottom, take that strip, because it's just a question that's coming in. We're not going to write on their response, so we don't need any extra space. And the worst part is, when I was principal at the madrasa, you'd get sometimes a request for leave or whatever written shabbily on half an envelope. Like the back of an envelope that's just clean, literally like a torn envelope, they will write on there and say, no, you're not going to have I won't give you leave. This is so disrespectful. So yes, at the same time that we're not wasting paper, we also have to have some kind of husn and jamal in what we're doing, ihsan in what we're doing. You can't just get a torn kind of paper and take that. Things have changed now. But paper was so valuable and at premium, and people weren't well off, that I remember one of the older students in madrasa telling us, when I first joined Darul Uloom Bury, that Hazrat Maulana Yusuf Mutala Sahab, Damat Barakatuhum, and his brother, they were not well off when they were studying. And the paper that they had, the books that they had, they would literally write so small that they could fit 3 lines into 1 line space, just so that they could get more in. Now, for us, it's a whole different game, it's just a different thing. The quality of the paper was also not of archivable quality. So after a few years, it gets yellow and, it gets brown, and it's just the way things are. Nowadays, books are on acid-free paper, so they can last for tens of years. That's why we publish all of our books on that kind of paper. Make sure it's of archivable quality, that it will live for 100 years without becoming brown on the sides. And also, when I first went, I remember I'd gone to America and I had a doctor friend there who gave me these notes, those sticky notes you get, the post-it notes, but these were larger ones from the medical, the doctors are giving them free for the pharmaceutical companies, and on quality paper. So I take them to India and I gave them to some of the teachers, and they were like, wow, this is so nice paper, this is. Because there it was that yellow paper, that thin paper that just about, kind of survives. And I said, this is the stuff they give out for free in the West. So and this is still the case in many places. It's still the case in many places. It's still like that. We just take all of this for granted. I mean, in Mauritania, we went to one of the students' room, and it's on our documentary as well, but what they use for counting is what I saw is the lid, a plastic lid of a bucket or something. And there was sand on it. I said, what is that for? Is that for tayammum? What do you mean? I mean, it's all sand anyway. Why have you got this bit of sand in this lid? So then he went like this and made these indentations. And then he said, when we're memorizing, learning our lesson, then we clear them one by one. So it's his counter. So they use the most basic things like that. People still do that in the world. For us, we'd probably order a timer or order something like that to do it with, because everything's available now. Amazon.com.co.uk, whatever. It's all available. So we want particular things for everybody. So he's saying here, if the paper is of good quality, then use both sides to write on. Don't waste it. Do not waste. That must assume that there must have been not so good quality paper where you could only write on one side, because the other side would be unwritable afterwards. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, do not waste. Verily wasteful ones are the brothers of the shaitan. Israf, which is musrifin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is mubadhirin actually, they're brothers of shaitan. It's worse than israf. There's two concepts in Arabic. One is israf and one is tabdhir. Tabdhir, they're the brothers of shaitan. Israf is to go beyond the limit in something that is of use, but just to do it extra. Where you could have done it with something less, you went extra and did more. But it's halal and so on. Tabdhir is when you waste money in what is not appropriate, what is not of benefit, what is maybe even haram or wrong. Then you are the brothers of shaitan in doing that. So in Arabic is very particular in the nuances of particular actions. Okay, do not use extravagant titles or flattery when writing. Be moderate. Don't just use those kind of things to get a better favor or whatever. Have respect though for people. What I've noticed is that the way South Africans write, they have everybody is a muhtaram. So there's like dear muhtaram, muhtaram sheikh, whatever. They've got some specific adab. Even the way they speak is a bit different. They won't say you. They'll refer to you in the third person. Does Maulana want to come? Does Mufti Sahib want to come? Like, which Mufti Sahib? When you're not used to it, you have to get used to that kind of that kind of speaking. Should that be done? It's a mizaj. It's just the nature of some people. It's a mizaj. Is it sunnah to do that? Not necessarily. It's sunnah to be respectful. This is what's considered respect there. Alhamdulillah. Do you understand? They can't say somebody who doesn't do that is disrespectful. We're not saying that's sunnah in particular, but it's a sunnah to be respectful. This has to be understood because a lot of people confuse matters here. Then they start labeling things bid'ah and non-bid'ah and part of sharia and not part of sharia. It's the confusion is there. Some people just have a mizaj of doing something. There's a mizaj aspect. For example, There are certain communities where speaking about karamat is the mizaj. They love those stories. And they will speak about the special miracles of pious people and so on, and that is the common discussion, and they love that discussion. There are some communities where they hate that discussion. If you really ask them, but do you believe in the karamatul awliya? Then they'll say, yes, we do. But their mizaj is such that they want to dismiss as much of it as possible. Whereas if you take that same story to that first community, they will be more than willing to accept it. Then you've got communities in between. Their mizaj is to accept, but not to obsess over it. Do you understand? It's not their only discussion they have. There's more to life than just that. Karamat, they completely agree with. They do have stories of karamat, but that's not all they're speaking about. Whereas some, that's all they're speaking about. And it can be heavy for the person who's not from that community. So it's just about understanding the mizaj. Because somebody asked me the other day that, we also speak about karamat. But why is it that when there's a karama of kind of an unbelievable karama sometimes, the kind of more extreme karamats as such, of another group, we're willing to dismiss it? A lot of the time this happens as well. We're getting on to a bit of a different subject, but sometimes what happens is that people, because they have a high regard for their mashayikh, their ulama, their elders, if something's coming from them, then they're more willing to accept it, even if it's kind of a bit abnormal, like a bit beyond the thingy. But when it comes from another group's mashayikh, then that must be that must be an exaggeration, or that must be this, that, or the other. It's a mizaj issue, and as humans we must understand this is the way humans are. So if we wisen up on this, then it's easier to understand. But again, it's a mizaj issue, a kind of a approach and a temperament issue, that some people just speak about karamat more than others. Like, we're not going to deny it, but it's not something we speak about all the time, because that's not the objective of life. As the Sufis will tell you that these are side issues anyway. But for some communities, this is what that keeps their iman up. Really, this is what keeps their iman up, to just know these stories and speak about them and tell everybody else. Alhamdulillah, that's them. We're not going to deny it, but we don't have to speak like that either. But we don't want to be completely dry as well. And so I think it's really nice to be in between. I think that's where we are. We're kind of in between, right? He was saying, do not use extravagant titles. Do not be too brief in writing. Address elders with appropriate titles of respect. A lot of people, I've gotten used to this, but they'll just say, dear brother, please help me out. Okay, I'll help you out, no problem. There are people who are like that, dear brother, which is fine, alhamdulillah. But some ulama will not be used to that, and they will take offense to that. I'm used to it now. I'm used to it. I've been called a brother so many times. Alhamdulillah, I'm your brother. It's fine. But there will be ulama, you call them dear brother, bhai sahab, ye thora kar lo, like come on man, be more respectful. They may not say anything, but the people around them would be a bit offended. Some people denigrate ulama. I was sitting at one table, and somebody mentioned that, okay, he's an alim. He's just a concerned brother. Like, for some reason, I don't know what level of ilm he requires for an ulama. And of course, nobody in this time and age, it's very difficult to find the ulama like Hassan al-Basri. But that's how we all are. There was an argument in a masjid. They're arguing that the Imam Sahib watches TV. Now, you can imagine this is a very old argument, because now everybody's on YouTube, even if they don't have a TV in the house. Even people who hate pictures and who don't take pictures and whatever, they're all going to watch YouTube. There's very few people who, I don't want to watch a YouTube video. Very hard to come by. And there probably are people like this. It says, is salat permissible behind the imam because he watches TV? That was the question. And all these old guys, they're all arguing about it. So a friend of mine, as a Maulana, he was there. He said, do you watch TV? Do you watch TV? They were like, yes. Okay, that's fine. Your namaz is fine then. Your salat is fine behind him. Because you watch TV as well, your salat is fine. Stop arguing. The letter should be written in the language of the addressee. If you want an answer, I'm assuming. Right? And if you think, well, there's Google Translate, well, why don't you use Google Translate first to send it to them in English or whatever else? SubhanAllah, we get questions from places like India and Pakistan. And my first response is, please contact a local mufti there. Sometimes they write English in Urdu, they write Urdu in English, and they send it like that.
Allah.
It's quite difficult to read that, you know. And it's like, just ask the local scholars. But because the local scholars are probably not online there, and they just find the Western scholars online, that's why they contact you sometimes. The internet has made, it's a very interesting thing that goes on in the world now. It's ajib. You can literally cater, your da'wah can reach the world now, where, you know, that's why we record these classes, so that other people can, inshaAllah, benefit. And Allah accepts.
Ameen.
When there is a need to discuss more than one subject in a single letter, do not write confusingly. Obviously, speaking from experience, don't basically merge one question into the two separate topics. Number them if you can. But I have learned that if you expect too much from this is obviously trying to teach people, so it's good. But as an alim who's responding to this, you know, if you get frustrated with these things, then your life can become quite miserable. So you have to overlook a lot of these things and just try to get by, help people. Because answering questions is 100% return. If I give a bayan, if I write a book, they say the statistic is 5 to 10% return rate on that people will take it and implement it. But as Mufti Salman Sahib said, he goes, when somebody asks you a question, they've come with a particular talab and a need, and you respond to them, that's 100% rate of return. So that's why one has to do that. Very lucrative business, by the way. Very lucrative. As long as we can avoid the mistakes. Very lucrative, inshaAllah. This is obviously encouragement for the ulama. So, imams, you get the perks of this through being an imam. Because that's when people will know you. If you're just a regular alim and nobody's going to come and ask you a question, you have to then establish yourself as somebody who can do that. If you have the title of mufti, it does help. But if you're an imam, people are going to come and ask the imam questions. So the perk of this job is that you get this lucrative business going on the side, this investment in your hereafter. An important letter, he says an important letter or a letter for which a reply is required should be sent by post, not with a person who happens to be just passing by. Again, this just depends, but nowadays people hardly send letters anyway. In general, do not just think before you write. Do not just write whatever you feel. Always consider the feeling of the addressee. This is the secret of any good writing. Believe me, this is the secret of any good writing. In fact, even in the publishing industry, this is what they say. It says, don't write what you want, write what the reader wants, if you want your book to be popular. What I mean by that is that you don't write against your morality, you know, against your ethos. We're just saying that when I write an email, I try to put myself in that person's mind. How are they going to perceive my email? I always do that, right? I mean, mostly that's what I try to do. Sometimes you do get really busy and you're shooting off an email, you can't do that. But that's the secret. If you think and put yourself in their mind, not how you want them to think, how you think they will think, then you will save yourself from a lot of grief in your correspondence on WhatsApp or whatever it is. I mean, mashallah, Hakim al-Ummat was truly the physician of the Ummah. He says, fold the letter neatly and insert it correctly in the envelope. Do not insert it carelessly in such a way that the adhesive on the envelope sticks to the letter as well. This creates a difficulty for the addressee. Sometimes a portion of the letter then is ripped while opening it. So he's just saying, be careful in all of these things, because this is Islamic ihsan, as they say, ihsan in these matters. And do not unnecessarily write lengthy letters. Have it concise, to the point, but with sufficient information. Don't just go on and on and on. This is a big problem. Generally what I found is that people will call you up and say, Mufti Sahib, I need to meet you. I said, okay, fine. I need half an hour of your time. And I know you don't need half an hour of my time. Nobody needs half an hour of your time unless they want to tell you a story. But there's no need for the story, because the question is at the end. right? So I'll say, look, I don't think you need half an hour, but I can give you 5 minutes after Dhuhr, right? You have to start that way. Then it does get to 10-15 minutes, but if you give them half an hour, you can't give everybody half an hour. When you're new on the game, when you're just new, you can give everybody the whole day, believe me. Because you've got nothing else to do. You just want to talk to people and help them. But when you've got so much and so many people, then you have to start. It's not being arrogant or anything like that, believe me. It's just, Allah forbid from that happening. It's just the fact that you don't have the time. And there's 10 other people who want to see you as well. So generally the story is a long story, but you don't need to know that story. You don't need to know your 10 years history. You just need to know the general and get to the point. For example, once there was a divorce issue, and now divorce responses are generally given on the final words that are said, not on 10-year story, but they will start with the 10-year story, thinking it's pertinent, and it's not. So I listen, and then I'll say, okay, let's get to the question first, then we'll come back to it. Right? Some people find that very difficult. They're very linear, so they want to tell you the story. You have to keep telling them, no, give me the question first. Then of course sometimes you do need to know why, so then you do have to go back. But in divorce cases, you generally just need to know the last 5 minutes. That's it. The exact words that are said, because it really matters what was said, and the circumstances under which it was said, immediate circumstances, not 10 years ago circumstances. He says the letters of female should be endorsed with the signature of a mahram male, husband, father, etc. This closes the door to mischief. This is quite a wise, and nowadays what generally people do is that they will, if a woman is sending an email and she's married or whatever, she will CC her husband in. I've CC'd my husband on this. That's a nice way of doing it these days, just so that they know what's going on. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a woman asking a man for a question. It's done traditionally. The Prophet ﷺ used to be approached by women. And if you look at even in places like Balkh, Afghanistan, because my PhD is on Shaykh Abul Layth al-Samarqandi, and if you see his book, it says, Ja'at imra'a, a woman came and I was in the class, she started asking this question. Right, they came with their parda and everything and started asking their question. Nowadays, it's very easy for email. But there are women who today are in such a situation that they've been told that you cannot correspond. And they have a question, it's about their husband, or it's about something fard in their life, something big issue. But they just don't know how to ask because they feel shy. There's no shyness in the faith when it comes to these kind of issues, right? Because you have to ask these questions. So there's a safe way of asking these questions, of course, to avoid the mischief. But no form of shyness should prevent you from knowing your deen. That's important. Some scholars were very strict. Mufti Rashid Ludhianwi, he writes that once somebody sent a donation to the masjid, to his institute, madrasa, and what did he say? They sent it, and then they also said that when you receive it, please confirm receipt, as we do nowadays. And he was just so ghani, just so independent of all of these things, total reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I don't think, this is very peculiar to his situation, right? I'm not encouraging this because you won't get away with it, right? Only certain people can do this. So he wrote back, he said, look, he said if they've donated, it's to their benefit. Now look at the istighna. He says they've donated, it's to their benefit. And they want to burden us with telling them that we've received it. Not everybody can do that. It's considered today it's considered like just a decency to know, and you need to know just confirmation of receipt because where the money goes and things like that. But he was on a totally different level. He was on a totally different level. Once he says that in one letter somebody posed a number of questions. In the same letter he also informed that he was sending a money order of a certain amount of money for the mother, for whatever the money was, in expectation of the arrival of the money, that when I get the money then I will respond the answers as well, so I have to just give one response. Otherwise I'll respond with the answers, then I'll have to respond with accepting the receipt of the money. But the money didn't come for many days, and after that he was very particular. So he just wrote the letter and he says, either you should not have informed in your letter of your intention to send the money order, or in the same letter you should not have written the queries for which replies were required. Now, there's a few things. If you analyze this, you can understand that he has care for this person. That's why he's saying this. Otherwise, he could have just disregarded it, not responded to him. But he feels I get so many emails, I can't respond to all of them. Right? Now, he's getting a letter. You've received the letter in which you have to respond to some fatwas that have been asked, but also acknowledge the money, but the money hasn't come. So now you're in a limbo. So finally he writes and he says, look, you should not have combined these two things in one letter. Because your money hasn't come. It means you haven't sent it, you've delayed, obviously. But he could have just ignored the whole thing. But he's so particular that he wants to respond to it. And he wants to teach the right way of doing these things. So that's how he does it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to correspond properly. It's such a big part of our life nowadays, more so than before. It was almost as if writing letters was something that very few people did. Now everybody's writing to each other, through these things. People are writing to the world nowadays. You could never do that before, unless you were in the media. But now every person can get himself on Twitter or Facebook, tell the whole world what he's thinking, what he wants them to do. And subhanAllah, there's a responsibility that goes with that. And that is what is important. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to use these things for their best potential. They're a form of da'wah and we have to use them, but to avoid the harms that come from them. That's the difficult part. And that is where most of the efforts of the ummah is going, is on the wasting of time on these things, less the benefit. Inflaming flames of sectarianism, of violence. The Muslim world is on, subhanallah, Allah help us, the world is on fire. I mean, there's just a border from Saudi Arabia to Yemen, and it could be anything. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help and protect the Muslim ummah, and bring back some sense of humanity and insaniyah and stability and a focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very important. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث. اللهم يا حنان يا منان لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. اللهم أصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى من القول والفعل والعمل والنية. اللهم يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث. اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا. اللهم أصلح ذات بيننا. اللهم انصرنا. اللهم انصرنا. اللهم انصرنا. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم اغفر لموتانا المسلمين الذين شهدوا لك بالوحدانية وماتوا على ذلك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.